Welcome back to Spider Red, where yesterday we had a great day of college football. The noon games, I was switching between 3 games at noon. Then the 3:30 games, I was switching back and forth. The night games, I was switching back and forth. Even though those got kind of lost towards the fourth quarter, but all the games were very good. Leading up to Week 11, I'm going to go over my top 12, and then I'll do a brief rundown of 13 through 25, and then at the end, I'll do my top 12 bracket. At number 12, I have the Missouri Tigers. I just think that they hung around all day with Georgia yesterday. I was so impressed. They were able to move the ball against their defense. Their running game was really good. The quarterback Cook was able to make the plays that he needed to. They had some big third downs. I was very impressed with this football team. They played us very well last year, did it again. I put them at number 12 for a few reasons. Their 2 top 25 wins, I think, are better than some of the other 2-loss teams. And really, it comes down to me, their losses they've hung around in all their losses compared to some of the other 2-loss teams that I have ranked 13 through 18. Like Oregon State, they had some teams that they lost to that weren't even top 25 teams. So that's why I have Missouri at number 12. So this week, instead of doing like a highlighted player, I'm just going to do a player of the game from over the weekend. So for week 10, I actually have Cody Schrader. He is a walk-on transfer from Truman State. He had 112 yards rushing and a TD versus Georgia yesterday. The kid was a force yesterday. I was so impressed, but those 2 interceptions in the fourth quarter was just too much for them to overcome to have the possibility of upsetting Georgia. They have Tennessee this week, which will be a big game for them. And then they still have to play Florida and Arkansas. But I honestly think that they'll run the table on those 3 teams. May have a shot at a New Year's Day bowl game. So at number 11, I have Penn State. I have been picking on them and discussing about how their offense has been struggling. Well, they played very well yesterday. They showed me up a little bit. I've been telling them they needed to find an offense, and they did. They had several long drives. Aller, I have been picking on him, and he had a really good game yesterday. Their defense created 4 turnovers. We all know they have that very good defense. So we'll see if this offense that we saw this past week might have a little bit of momentum against Michigan. I just still think that Michigan is just more talented and a better football team. The way they played this past week, if they can move that along, they could have a chance. This is Michigan's first test. They could go in and upset them, especially with everything that's hanging over Michigan's head. They played very well this week. Their player of the game, I have been picking on Drew Aller. So the quarterback, number 15, I'm going to give him their player of the game yesterday. He had 240 yards passing with 4 TDs. So I have Penn State at number 11. At number 10, I have the Louisville Cardinals. Everyone was saying that Virginia Tech may give them a game, possibly have a chance to upset them. But the Cardinals dominated Virginia Tech yesterday. I'm going to go ahead and go to my player of the game for them. I'm going to give it to their entire defense. They held Virginia Tech to 140 yards of total offense. They pretty much shut them down. I only got to see clips of this game, so I don't have too much to talk about Louisville. I have them at number 10. They play Virginia this week, who did upset North Carolina, and then they still have Miami and Kentucky, so they still have some pretty good games that they need to get through to be able to have a shot at that ACC title game and probably play Florida State. So let's see if they can beat these last 3 teams, Virginia, Miami, and Kentucky, and make it to that ACC championship. At number 9, I have the Ole Miss Rebels. They were saved by Texas A&M's field goal kicker. He missed that last field goal at the end. They were leading the game until like 4 minutes left when Texas A&M scored a touchdown to go up 35-31. Ole Miss turned around, drove the ball all the way down the field, scored what was ultimately the game-winning drive for them. This team, they have the offense. They have a very good shot of upsetting Georgia. They run run the ball well. They've got Dart as a quarterback. I mean, he can keep them in the game if Georgia can slow down the running game, which Georgia did not slow down the running game against Missouri. They pretty much, after Georgia, they have a cupcake game, and then they still have Mississippi State. Mississippi State is still an SEC team. They usually play them very well. So we'll see how well they play against Georgia this week. My player of the game for them yesterday is Quinshon Judkins, running back number 4. He had a big game against Texas A&M last year, and then this year he had 102 rushing yards and 3 TDs. So he was getting the job done in the red zone when Ole Miss needed it. Going into the game next week, let's see how well they fare against Georgia. This might be a surprise to some, but I actually have Oregon moving down to number 8. They slaughtered the Cal Bears yesterday. They play USC this week in Eugene. USC did fire their DC, so we'll see if whoever they make their interim DC can make a few changes, because USC's defense has been absolutely horrible. I mean, they still have the Heisman winner from last year, Caleb Williams. He can always keep them in the game. I honestly still think Oregon is going to have zero issues against USC, and they're going to win this game. The reason I have Oregon falling back, Oregon only has those 2 top 25 wins against Colorado and Utah. USC's a good test, Arizona State's a good test, and then at the end of the year, their in-state rival will be a bigger test. I still think Oregon is a very good football team, and they control their destiny. I have always said I was going to keep this fluid by week to week, and I just think that there's 2 other one-loss teams that played better this weekend and have some better wins than they do at the moment. Going to number 7, I have the Alabama Crimson Tide. They had a big win against LSU. Milroe put on a show with his legs. That defense held the nation's top offense under 30 points. Bama just keeps rolling. But can they keep running Milroe that much? I don't think so. But if Ole Miss loses to Georgia and they beat Kentucky this week, they will clinch the West. Even with Auburn at the end of the season, it wouldn't be enough losses because they would own the tiebreaker against everyone else. The reason I moved them up is because they now have 3 top 25 wins over Oregon's 2. So that was the reason I moved them up and bumped Oregon down. And that defense is starting to play really well. LSU is the nation's overall top offense by yards per game. Alabama contained them, and then Milroe just put on a show. So it was an impressive win for Alabama, and that's why I have them at number 7. The guy I have for them yesterday is Milroe. 219 yards passing, but he had 155 yards rushing with 4 rushing TDs. I don't think they're going to be able to keep that up, but that was an impressive game for that kid. So let's move on to number 6. I have the Texas Longhorns. They survived an overtime win over Kansas State with their backup quarterback, Malik Murphy. Murphy did just enough. Now, they did have a big lead, and they almost fumbled it away. Murphy did throw a few interceptions. Like I said last week, they're going to need Ewers to not only go to the college football playoff, but have a chance of winning a national title. Now, let's see if they can finish strong with these 3 last games. They still have TCU, Iowa State, pretty much beat anybody any week, if you ask me, and then they still have Texas Tech. So they still need to finish strong against these 3, and then they'll probably play the Big 12 title against Oklahoma State if Oklahoma State wins out as well. Texas could use that as well so that they can get into that college football playoff this year. The other reason I moved them ahead of Oregon, they now have 3 top 25 wins. Kansas keeps moving up. Now Kansas State's going to fall out, but they have the big one against Alabama. That's why I have them ranked over Alabama. And then Kansas keeps playing well, so they have that win against Kansas in Kansas State. So that's why I have Texas and Alabama over Oregon. They have more quality wins in my eyes. At number 5, I have the Michigan Wolverines. They are still my lowest ranked undefeated team because in the graphic, they just haven't played anybody still. They haven't 0 wins against a top 25 team. Now, they rolled past Purdue yesterday, but Purdue is not a good football team. The sign stealing continues to get worse. I'm not going to discuss that anymore, but they have their first big test. So they have to go down to Happy Valley. So we're going to see how well they play play against one of the top 5 defenses in the nation. So this is their time to kind of hush the critics, go down there, play a really good football game, and get a win. I think that they're just a better football team, like I mentioned earlier when I was talking about Penn State, and I think that they're actually going to win big because of everything that's going on right now. So the game is at noon. I'm pretty excited for it. At number 4, I have my Georgia Bulldogs. We kind of struggled a little bit. When we got in the red zone, Missouri's defense just played really well. I think we tried too many trick plays in the red zone. I don't know if Bobo's trying to set something up against some of the other games that we have coming up. We've got to find a way to have a better run defense. We got to start stopping the run game a little better. Our defense, I thought they were they were improving each week. I have to give more credit to Missouri. Missouri's a good football team. I was very impressed with Missouri. Georgia had those 2 huge interceptions, and that pretty much sealed the win for them. So they have another huge test this week. They have Ole Miss coming into Athens. College game days going to be at the campus. And then the following week, they'll have to play Tennessee. So Georgia's still going to have a chance to prove that they have that AP ranked number 1 or keep the college football ranking of number 2. They could have up to 4 top 25 wins by the end of the season, and then they'll probably play Alabama in the SEC championship game. This week, my player of the game for them was Nazir Stackhouse, the big defensive lineman, number 78. He had that huge interception. I was hoping that he could rumble and stumble all the way to the end zone. He got tripped up inside the 10, but that was a huge interception for us. Absolutely huge. It pretty much saved the game to me, and Kirby Smart even said it as well. He thought that was the biggest play of the game. But that's who I have at number 4. Number 3, I have the Florida State Seminoles. I actually have the Seminoles dropping down 1 spot because I think some other teams or one other team actually did enough this week to move up. Plus, some of Florida State's quality wins are looking less and less, especially with LSU getting beat badly by Alabama. Now, both of their top 25 wins have 3 losses, and those wins are diminishing some. And they don't play any more top 25 teams to kind of hold on to their ranking. I still think they're a good football team. They still have Miami, North Alabama, and Florida to go. Miami's a decent team. Florida's an average team. Florida is playing a lot of true freshmen. They're a very young football team. But I think Florida State's going to roll on Miami and Florida. And then that will give them a shot to go into the ACC championship game against Louisville. That will give them a shot to making the college football playoff. They have to win these next 3 games. They'll need a big win against Louisville in the ACC championship to solidify top ranking. But at the same time, they have one of the best shots at staying undefeated because Washington still has some good football teams to go through. Georgia, Michigan, and Ohio State got to play each other, so one of them are going to lose. You could almost only have 1 undefeated team this year, and that could be Florida State. They have the best shot of staying undefeated out of the last 5 undefeated teams right now. They might keep dropping down in my list because I am keeping it fluid, but I still think they have the best shot of making the college football playoff. Player for the game I had for Florida State is Akeem Dent. He was their defensive back number 1. He had 7 tackles against Pitt. I just thought he played a really good game. I actually went back and watched some of that game, and I thought he had a very good game. That's why I picked him. But that's why I have Florida State at number 3. So at number 2, I have the Ohio State Buckeyes. I actually, for the first time, have them falling out of the number 1 spot. They let Rutgers hang around all for a good portion of the game. Ohio State had a huge 93-yard pick 6 that really just switched the game. I've talked about this before with momentum in college football. Momentum means so much in college football. After they did that, Rutgers just couldn't seem to get their feet underneath them. The reason I have them dropping down is Notre Dame's win is looking less and less. They got beat by Clemson this weekend. That win is diminishing. Let's see about Penn State, but they haven't played anybody else. The other teams are playing top 25 teams. Now, we all know in 3 weeks, and this is what we're waiting for Ohio State, they play Michigan in the big game. Michigan's got to get past Penn State. Either way, even if Michigan loses to Penn State, this is still a huge game for both teams because a win in that game is going to propel them into the Big Ten championship and to possibly to the college football playoff. But I have Ohio State moving down just because they're just not playing anyone. Their player of the game was the kid that had the 93-yard pick six that changed the game against Rutgers, and that's Jordan Hancock, the cornerback number 7. So at number 1, I have the Washington Huskies. I know this might be a big surprise again to some. I just think that they're playing the best football right now. I kind of picked on them last week that I thought that one of the next 3 games might catch them, and it still might happen. They beat an very good Oregon team. They beat a high-powered USC offense. As we saw last night, that was a very fun game. This team, the reason I'm putting them up there is because they can score at will. Dillon Johnson had a monster game. We concentrate so much on Penix because he is good, but when you have probably a top 3 Heisman candidate quarterback, and then you have this kid number 7 rushing for 256 yards and 4 TDs against USC. Now, we know USC's defense is not that great, but still, 256 yards against anybody is an incredible game. And you have to give them credit for that. And Washington, they played enough defense against Oregon to win that game. They still have to beat Utah, and they still got to go to Oregon State. And then Washington State, their rival, is still a good football team. Washington still has a lot to play. They probably have as much as Michigan, Georgia, and Ohio State to play. It's going to be a fun ending of the regular season to see if they can run the table. So let's see if they can. And I've already mentioned Dillon Johnson. He was my player of the game yesterday. God, that kid was just running all over USC. But I moved them up because I just thought it was an impressive win. They're going to be able to keep going. They've got 2 more top 25 games to go. They might have to play Oregon again. Washington, they control their own destiny like every top 10 team does because a lot of them play each other or have a chance to play each other again. So they have a chance to control their destiny, and it's going to be fun to watch. Now let's move on to the rest. So at number 13, I had talked a little bit about Missouri. I just thought Missouri's resume is better than the other teams that have 2 losses. From Oregon State to Tennessee, they all have 2 losses right now. I have Oregon State over Utah because they beat Utah, and I just think that Utah, they got to play Washington this week. I have Oklahoma State keep creeping up. Oklahoma State has now beat Kansas and Oklahoma to move into that 15 spot. That's their 2 big wins. That's why I have them keep moving up. I have Kansas still moving up. They're following Oklahoma State. Oklahoma, the last game in Bedlam for a little bit, they lost against Oklahoma State, so that's why I have them falling. I actually have Tennessee at 18 because Tennessee, like Michigan, they don't have a top 25 win. Their 2 losses are against Florida and Alabama, and Florida is not a good loss for them. That's not good for their resume. So that's why I have Tennessee at the bottom. It has nothing to do with how much I don't like Tennessee. I am being completely fair here because the other teams in front of them have beat several top 25 teams. Some have beat top 10 teams at the time. When Kansas first upset Oklahoma, Oklahoma, I had them ranked 2. But that's how I kind of sifted through the 2 loss teams. So at 19, I have Tulane. They only have 1 loss. As I said last week, I thought they played Ole Miss very well. And I think with their 1 loss, they deserve to be at that point. So I have my first 3-loss team moving up into the top 25. I actually put Arizona at number 20. Arizona has played 5 straight games against top 25 teams, and they're 3-2 against them. They only lost to my number 1 team, Washington, by 7 points. They got beat 31-24. They lost to USC. USC beat them 43-41, and then they've beat number 19 Washington State. They beat number 11 Oregon State, and then they just beat UCLA. So I have them moving up because, to me, they have one of the best resumes. They've won 3 3 straight top 25 wins. That's huge. Not a lot of teams. There's nobody, I don't think there's anybody in the country that has had 5 straight top 25 games in a row this year. Now they move on. They play Colorado, and then after that they have Utah, which I think will probably still remain in the top 25 as well. And then they have their in-state rival, Arizona State. But I moved them ahead of some of the other 3-loss teams because of what they are going through, their gauntlet that they've went through. So then my next 2 teams, I have Liberty and James Madison. Those are the 2 undefeated mid-majors that I have ranked. And then I have Notre Dame falling all the way to 23. I would rate them as my second best 3-loss team. And then I have LSU now with the Texas and Alabama bad defeats. Man, they're barely hanging in that top 25 for me. And then I left Kansas State in the top 25 because they played Texas so well. I mean, they were 1 play away from possibly winning the game. The coach went for it on 4th down in overtime instead of kicking a field goal to go into another overtime. They held Texas to a field goal. So he went for the win. So you have to give him credit for that. So Kansas State, that's why I left them in the top 25. Now let's go into our bracket. Washington at number 1. They would play the winner of 8 or 9, which would be Oregon or Ole Miss. We move down the bracket. We have the 12-5 game, which would be Missouri against Michigan. And that winner would play Georgia at number 4. On the other side of the bracket, at the top, we have number 3, Florida State. They would play the winner of Penn State and Texas. And then at the bottom of the bracket, we would have the 10-7 game, which would be Louisville versus Alabama. And that winner would go on to play Ohio State. So we have another big week for week 11 coming up. The 2 big games will be Michigan and Penn State and Georgia and Ole Miss. So I'm excited to get to watch those games this week. Tell somebody you love them. Thank you for listening to Spider Red. Later.